For the first time since Melissa and I have been married, we spent our Thanksgiving holiday away from all of our family, and it was wonderful. We spent our Thanksgiving holiday doing the Lord's work on the other side of the world. And yes, it was wonderful. Oh, please understand, we miss being with our family. But the brethren here at Forest Hill and other brethren elsewhere helped us be able to make this journey and do it at a time when we could really be of the utmost benefit, make the utmost opportunity being in both Singapore and India. Just to lay the groundwork for the trip, we had our objectives were really twofold. The objective began with simply having the opportunity to participate in some edification in Singapore. We've been invited to participate in the Four Seas College of the Bible lecture series. This lecture series has been taking place for some 17 years. The Four Seas College of the Bible has a long history of training and sending out preachers, especially in the area of Southeast Asia. They have graduates. I believe the last number I heard was in some 20 countries in that region, which is quite impressive. And one of the benefits of being able to participate in that lecture series is those lessons in 2024 had been viewed some 11,000 times by the end of the lectureship weekend. So in terms of attendance, well, you're looking at around between 200 and 250. In terms of viewership and impact, it's hard to measure. So the goal in Singapore was edification. The goal in India was both edification and education. And here's why we say that. In Singapore, we were looking at the lectures, but also combined with the lectures in Singapore, there are multiple gospel meetings taking place where there are 3 congregations in a city of over 6 million. Now, this city is about 15 miles long and 6 miles wide. It is a very tightly packed area, a population density of about 8,000 per square kilometer, which pales in comparison to Hyderabad, where we would go, where it's about 18,000 per square kilometer. Billy Bland said, if you want privacy in India, just close your eyes. That's the only way you'll get it. But those things being said, in Singapore, you're looking at a population of around 6 million and really 3 solid congregations, to my knowledge, that work strongly together and encourage one another. Now, those things being said, wouldn't that happen? Now, if it's the case that someone from here just placed that call, repent. We also wanted to encourage the local congregations, and we'll discuss more about those momentarily. In India, we wanted to edify and work with education. Prashant Dasari recently graduated from here at Memphis, and in moving to India, his goal was to start a school of preaching in Hyderabad. There are some questions among some works in the overall area, and he simply wanted to set out to be involved in a work that could be of good repute and report. Central India School of Preaching is the name of the school. Just the week before Melissa and I traveled there, BJ and Tish were there with Prashant and his family inaugurating the school. So we were able to visit the first week that the school was after it was inaugurated. So we were going there to edify, meet the school students, visit area congregations, teach in any way that we could teach. Also, those things being said, our objective involved meeting up with a group that would already be there. Billy Bland, Jamie Long, Jason Moore, Tim Burrows, Tim Hayes, and Jonathan Burns had traveled over there about a week and a half earlier, and they had already been in multiple countries in Southeast Asia, and so we'd be meeting with them, working in Singapore, and then as they were coming home, we would be traveling into India. So there would be a little bit of American support there, if you will, as we got this ball rolling. Not a bad thing. To put things into perspective, we got off to a stormy start. Literally, the storm weren't here in Memphis, so they were in Dallas-Fort Worth, but that's where our flight was going. And so as we boarded our first flight, we sat there for about 10 minutes before the captain said, we're going to try to leave as soon as possible. And then 2 minutes later, he said, we can't leave. They have grounded everything in Dallas. We ended up being about 2 hours late getting to Dallas. Our other flight had not left yet because it was grounded, but the interesting thing is our other flight wouldn't leave until about 24 hours later. It was indefinitely postponed. To make a short story long, instead of leaving from Memphis and traveling toward Dallas and then all the way over toward Narita Airport in Tokyo and ultimately to Singapore, we were rerouted. Now, we were nervous because we were rerouted on Qatar Airlines. Sometimes we'll pronounce it Qatar. And we were quite unfamiliar with it. Well, sometimes the blessings come in disguise. And if you ever get a chance to fly on Qatar Airlines, just go ahead and do it. Because it is a tremendous airline, and we greatly enjoyed even the airport there in Doha, the capital of Qatar. In fact, some of the scenes that are at the airport, they tout themselves as the nicest airport in the world, and it may well be. That being said, the trip got off to something of a start that made us nervous, but even the challenges brought a few blessings. Now, granted, those challenges provided some additional challenges also, because whereas we checked 3 bags, 2 of them didn't make it there for another 2 days. It was interesting. We went one direction, 1 bag went with us, 1 bag stayed in Dallas, and another bag went on to Tokyo. Ask American Airlines, don't ask me. Anyway, we arrived a little bit late, about 8 hours late on November 26th, the day that we were scheduled to arrive, and we had a narrow window, but fortunately we had given ourselves a little bit of extra time upon arrival, so we arrive a little bit late. We have to take care of missing luggage and get all of those things sorted. So by the time we were there on November 26th, we thought we were going to sit down and take about an hour nap, and we woke up 6 hours later. So fortunately, we didn't have anything scheduled for November 26th. We simply got there, got things sorted. November 27th, however, our bags still weren't there, and it was Melissa's clothes that were missing. And so we had to do some speed shopping that morning. Had you been watching us from a satellite, you would have been impressed at our pace. Fortunately, we are also able to be quite frugal in what we found, and so anytime we can find nice clothes for cheap, we're happy. But that being said, we needed to do some speed shopping so that we could get to the lectureship because I was scheduled to speak later that day. Upon arrival, we got everything started. Now, ultimately, the schedule in Singapore was a very manageable schedule as far as a mission trip goes. We were there to help participate in the lectureship and teach in gospel meetings at night, and so we would speak once, maybe twice in the day. Again, very manageable for a mission schedule. We met up with the rest of the group. There were a few photos taken of those that were participating. I spoke that afternoon, and after speaking, I got to hear some young gentlemen lead songs. You may not know the fellows whose pictures are up there, but you know their dad. He's a student here at school, Brother Paul Go. And if you've ever heard Paul lead singing, then you would probably have a high bar of expectation regarding his sons, and you'd be correct in doing so. They hold up to that bar. Titus is the eldest. Paul told me he's in Taiwan visiting his girlfriend right now. But Titus is the eldest, Justus is the younger. But it was an absolute delight to arrive there, get settled into the lecture series, and then hear a familiar name and meet some folks who I'd been looking forward to meeting. That being said, that was November 27th, November 28th. Again, we're at the lectures, teaching, and Billy Bland and I participated in their question and answer. Now, if you've ever, you preachers particularly, if you've ever been a part of a Q&A session or an open forum, you know that this is roughly equivalent to having your toenails removed with pliers because you never know what's going to come your way. Fortunately, the way they had it set up, we were able to get an idea of what was coming our way, and we did have at least 38 seconds to prepare for the next question, so that was a benefit. But the questions were very apropos, as you might expect. We were extremely encouraged. November 29th, we're at the lectures again. They would take a group picture, and the reason this is relevant is to bring out just a few ideas. There were about 250 folks there this year. This was a record, at least since COVID, for their attendance. That being said, whereas several of the folks that were there were from Singapore, there were also those there from Taiwan, from Philippines, other Southeast Asian countries, and yes, there were some of us from America. But the ones, there were some there who really risked everything to get there. They'd come from Laos and from China. I won't point out their faces, and I certainly won't share their names because they've had to endure some hardship just in order to preach the gospel and share it where they are. But it was an encouragement, an honor, and a sobering wake-up call to hear some of the things that they had to say regarding the challenges that they're facing, simply in order to spread the gospel in the area where they are. We went to edify them, but if you've ever gone on a trip endeavoring to edify, chances are you can relate to this. We left feeling like we were the ones that had gone to be edified. I don't know that we could have benefited them nearly as much as they did us. They had a singing that afternoon. That's not me being a Nazi saying Zig Heil. That's just leading a song. And then Melissa would speak that afternoon. Now, you'll notice a pattern. Melissa speaks, and then there's a fan club. There were those. One of the things that told Brother Steve Ulrich after I returned was I've always been skeptical and remain somewhat skeptical of those who are inexperienced trying to get their faces plastered all over social media and anywhere else claiming that they're teaching before they get education, get learning, get some know-how and experience. That being said, that skepticism does not apply to all efforts of social media or online teaching. And in this visit, I was surprised, as was Melissa, to learn how many people were already familiar with our faces simply because of the YouTube channel that Forest Hill has, or because of sermons taught at Polishing the Pulpit, or because of other online efforts in GBN. More often than not, the folks that we encountered, especially in Singapore, were familiar with many American teachers, male and female alike, because when they can find online content that is intended to educate and edify, they devour it. That was an encouragement and uplifting. And so Melissa had a fan club upon arrival and just grew while we were there. November 29th, this is still in Singapore. We would visit the Eastside congregation that evening. The Eastside congregation is a recent church plant from the Lima Pen congregation. Lima Pen is in an area where they are bursting at the seams, and so they planted a congregation of about 30, and within just a couple of years it was numbering 60. Now, this is a growing church, very active and involved and fun. You see the brother in the back holding up his, he's either saying, "I'm not a crook like Richard Nixon," or he's saying peace. But either way, he was quite enjoying himself. So many of the brethren there are in great humor, great spirits, and extremely encouraging. And happy not only to be with you, but happy to be Christians and serving the Lord. November 30th, this would be the Sunday. We would worship with the Lima Pen congregation. This is the building of the congregation that I said was bursting at the seams. And if you look closely, you'll notice that they are indeed quite full in their auditorium, so full that this is a room off to the side that they've opened up so that people can sit there and view. In fact, the layout is so precise and concise that where the speaker is standing, the only place they have for the pulpit is right beside a column, which works great when you're an ugly speaker, so you can just hide behind the column and speak to the microphone. They don't have to look at you. Those things being said, one of the interesting experiences was bumping into a fellow named Justin Kwan. The reason this was interesting is because the last time I saw Justin was right back there at that door. He had traveled through the U.S. and just happened to swing by here at Forest Hill and was happy to shake hands on that day because the first time I saw Justin was in 2013 in Budapest, Hungary. We'd crossed paths there. And so at this point, there are two people with whom I have stood on 3 continents, my wife and Justin Kwan. But that being said, it was very interesting to see how often we can meet some of the same brethren on completely opposite sides of the world. Lesson from that, behave. Somebody probably knows who you are. Still on November 30th, This is teaching, and you'll notice in the background, the title of the sermon was "To God Be the Glory." The reason that's relevant is because afterward, one of the brothers was very excited merely about the title because he'd made a craft that had "To God Be the Glory" written on it, stationed out in front of the church building, and he really wanted Melissa and myself to get a picture with it. I think he wanted me to get a picture with it. He called us both out there. But that being said, once again, a wonderful, encouraging time. Every day that we had a meeting with the brethren in Singapore, there was some sort of food involved. And I don't know how those people maintain their slender build as much as they eat. Maybe they just try to overfeed the Americans, thinking it was Thanksgiving and we were turkeys. But there was one thing that I saw in Singapore that astounded me. That's litter. There's actually litter in Singapore. I saw one other spot where there was litter. I've been told there was none, so I saw just a touch of litter. But that was it. It's an extremely clean city, very well kept, and the people there are extremely courteous, not only the brethren, but the people that you'll encounter on the street. This was the group that we had met. And by the time we're finished on November 30th, they are about ready to go. And so that evening, it was sort of a relaxed evening. By the time we were finished at all the different congregations where speaking was taking place. And then some of the sights that could be seen. In Singapore, they have what's called the Marina Bay area. It is an extremely beautiful, well-kept, up-class area. Then they also have a place called the Fullerton Hotel. Now, the Fullerton is quite affluent because as Melissa and I walked under it, just navigating the city, we found a 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. Of course, I knew that as soon as I saw it. 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud. And right beside it was a 1975 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. The point here being this is a hotel that uses these cars to transport people from, to chauffeur people in the city. And it does cost a little, about $10 a minute. 450 Singapore dollars for a 45-minute ride. Say all that to say this. This is a city that is very much... it's an expensive place to live. It is not always an easy place to live. The brethren there are not particularly affluent, but they are influential in the work where they are. So those things being said, we often see affluence and think, run from that, it can't work. Well, here's something to think about. Maybe it can. Now, December 1st. This particular day, we didn't have anything scheduled with Singapore, but the most classes were going to be taking place later that week, and I had a class I was teaching, and so I got everything set up in the hotel room, started teaching, and after 2 hours, I taught the class, and it didn't take. 2 hours of talking to a camera, and not even the camera was listening. So Melissa had been out of the hotel room with the rest of the group, just learning a little bit about Singapore. And so I texted her and told her to learn about 2 hours more, and then recorded the rest, re-recorded that class. If you were taking the most class, I really hope you got something out of that particular one. There was a send-off meal for the group, just to put things into perspective. And after that send-off meal, we tried to see if we could hold on to it or lose it when Jonathan Burns and I rode the slingshot. Good news, we held on to it. December 2nd, the rest of the group had left, and it was a personal day for Melissa and me before we traveled to India on the next day. And so a day-by-day account, on December 3rd, we would go from Singapore to India. We had one more chance to spend some time with Peter Chin and with Pui Fun Chin, Peter's bride. And that was an absolute delight to talk with them. I learned so much about the work of the church, not only in Singapore, but in Malaysia. Learned some of the details of what their sons are doing. The way the brethren cooperate and support one another and then reach out to support others beyond their immediate community is absolutely inspiring. And so it was wonderful to spend time with them. And then December 3rd, we flew from Singapore to India. These are two completely different environments. different cultures, different circumstances. In Singapore, we didn't need a translator. In India, we did. Fortunately, we had a very good one. Upon landing, we rendezvoused with Brother Prashant. And Brother Prashant, if you've spent any time with him, you know that his English is typically better than us Southerners. And he was very much a gracious host. Met us at the airport at about 10 p.m. that evening. It was after midnight by the time we got to the hotel. So there wasn't a whole lot completed on December 3rd, but that'd be the last day that happened. December 4th, we awakened. This was the view from our hotel room. We couldn't see much at night because we'd gotten there in the dark. But there's much under construction in Singapore, in Hyderabad, constantly under construction. Some of the construction seems like it might take a while, but there's constant construction. We got an introduction to some of the attire. Prashant insisted on presenting a gift to us in terms of wardrobe, and so that's Melissa in a Punjabi, and then he took me to get fitted for a suit. I'm actually wearing this one before you, and honestly, they did a great job with it, except for they didn't measure the calves. And apparently, my calves are bigger than most of the ones that they encounter, and so if you see these pants rip at the calf, it's not because I'm hulking out, it's just because of the tailor. But in all seriousness, it was an extremely welcoming reception that Prashant provided. And our introduction to Hyderabad would also include some other details of the Indian culture. For instance, we got to see the tuk-tuk, or as they call it, it's an auto rickshaw. They just call them autos. So often folks are riding motorcycles there. And the reason this is worth noting is because you see what the one on the left is hauling, multiple bundles of bananas. And then on the one on the right, his wife is riding what we would call side saddle. You see this everywhere. These people need the gospel because their lives are in jeopardy every time they get on the road. And now we say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it is very much the case that the motorcycle is perhaps the most common form of transportation. And the forms of transportation there are something in which they get rather ingenuitive. You'll see the fellow in the middle that has some sort of a sleeve that's about twice the width of the motorcycle as he's riding. And then the fellow on the far right has probably about 100 pounds of some sort of contraband in the bags that he's transporting, yet he's maintaining his balance. Here is a quick depiction of a brief ride in Hyderabad. You'll encounter streets with no lines. You'll encounter animals with no one watching them, but everyone watching them because of the Hindu culture. There is still a cultural belief among many that those animals could be ancestors. And so, of course, you can't order a hamburger in India because the cow is protected. Now, you can order chicken all day. But that being said, the livestock are often called speed breakers because when they're in the road, there's nothing that you can do but stop. And that's what Prashant would call them every time he hit the brakes and blew the horn, was a speed breaker. By the way, if you'll notice on the truck in front of us at this point, there's a little sticker on the back that says, "Please blow horn." They believe that there, and you'll hear the horn all the time. Now, those things being said, roads with no lines, and really the lanes are more suggestions than anything. You'll see how often the line is crossed and back and forth, but for the sake of time, we go ahead and move this forward. December 4th, we finally arrive and spend some time with the Central India School of Preaching. At the time that we arrived, there were 3 students, and then there were 3 other gentlemen who were preachers or had a background in preaching that were there to be edified. They're there to encourage and help the school in whatever way they could. And so it was quite uplifting to be able to spend some time with them. And we simply spoke on the need for preachers and the need for preachers to preach out of a love for the Lord and a desire to serve Him. That being said, we spent that time with them. And just prior to arrival, I thought that we'd be spending most of our time in Hyderabad, but that would be one of the few times that we got to see the students with the school, because Prashant had planned not only some edification and education, but a lot of evangelism as well, for which we were grateful. The picture on the right is Melissa, myself, and the Prashant family, Prashant and Angel. That evening, we were with the Sainik Puri Church of Christ. This is a congregation that has recently been planted. Brother Prashant is the preacher with the congregation. And just to give you an idea of the effectiveness of him as a translator, he really does do a solid job of mirroring the speaker, which is why I have one hand up right here and he has his left hand up on the other side. But he translates not only speech but gestures, which is extremely helpful. I don't recall wiping my nose, but had I done so, I think he would have done the same. And of course, I spoke, but it was Melissa that had the fan club. But in one picture, they let me pose with her fan club, so that was polite of them. December 5th, after spending one full day in Hyderabad, we boarded a plane for Tirupati. Tirupati is about a 7-hour drive south, but about an hour and a half flight. We were en route to Nellore, but the closest airport to Nellore is Tirupati. So we flew to Tirupati and hopped in a rented vehicle and drove to Nellore. Now, Nellore is maybe 60 miles away, but it's 2 to 2.5 hours on those roads and in that environment. Again, there are some more speed breakers and Melissa enjoying the view. But that being said, we arrived at Nellore, we got checked into the hotel, and that evening we visited with Christ Church in Nellore. Christ Church is a meeting house where the preacher, as I understand it, was a member of the Lord's church. His brother Emmanuel still is. And the brothers have a good relationship, and Emmanuel convinced his brother to let us visit and just speak with the congregation. And so we did. When we arrived, we were quite impressed with what was awaiting us because the young people had put together a series of different crafts and they really wanted those to be seen. And we don't have time to look at each of those, but to put things into perspective, here was a depiction of the days of creation. And so they put a solid amount of time, thought, and effort into what was portrayed. They had some depictions of different types of punishment. They had one craft that demonstrated, it was a 1 Corinthians 13 reference, but I think they called it a wheel of love. And as you spun a wheel, there was just a wedge cut out, and it would turn to another word that was hidden by the rest of the wheel and convey a different aspect of how love is described in 1 Corinthians 13. Quite impressive in terms of their crafts. These are folks that are familiar with the Bibles and are happy to talk about the Bible and hear it preached. And indeed, they came out in force for the lesson. The venue was full and the people were attentive. They had that look on their faces before I spoke, I promise. But the people were attentive and very receptive. In fact, after the sermon, of course, that's Prashant translating again, and there he is with his hand up just like mine. After the sermon, if you look at Prashant's eyes, apparently I asked him for a hamburger, and he told me I can't do that. But in all seriousness, I can't recall what was being said then, but that is Emmanuel on the far right. He's the one that arranged for us to be able to be there and speak with the group that, as I understand it, many of them, if not all of them, are unfamiliar with the actual Lord's church because of the nature of who it is that's preaching there. And of course, after we spoke, Melissa's fan club gathered together again. And whereas there were these two children that let us take a picture, I don't know that the boy was particularly happy that I was there. But this is December 5th. Now, we would be in this part of India for another 2 days. December 6th was a busy day. That morning, we drove an hour and a half to Kota. Kota is a small village where Prashant's mother lives. And because of the amount of material that we have, I can't even show you photos of her. But we drove to the village where Prashant's mother lived, visited with her for a bit, and we went to visit with the Kota Church of Christ. And there we spoke to what was supposed to be a preacher's meeting, but it ended up being a meeting of preachers and members all alike. And the topic on which we spoke there, whereas at Christ Church we spoke on can we change the doctrine of Christ, here it was the idea of what is man and the importance of our responsibility to God in those roles. The attendance was very encouraging. The attendees were extremely encouraging. And then following those events, Melissa would be speaking for a ladies' class not long after. We had time for lunch, then we came back and she would speak. The young lady translating for her is 15, if I recall correctly. And she's the daughter of the preacher there, but this was her first time or second time? Second time translating. She had translated one other time, and that was for Tish Clark. From what I was told, she did a good job, although I couldn't tell you a thing she said. The translator. I have no doubt that Melissa did fine. But in all seriousness, once again, a very excited group. And after every session, people really did want to have photos made. And the reason this is relevant is to say this. There is a natural inclination on the part of the folks there to want to listen and give a bit of deference, which is one of the reasons that it's actually beneficial to go there as a visiting speaker. Well, we see it in families all the time. There are those that are willing to listen to people outside of their families and not willing to listen to a family member who's a member of the Lord's church. Well, in this particular case, here are people that are willing to listen to us who are visiting, and maybe it's because of what they perceive of our culture, but they were very encouraging, very attentive. And so it turned out to be a wonderful opportunity not only to encourage the brethren in Coda, but also there are going to be a couple of other evangelistic opportunities. That afternoon, we left from Coda and rode out to the Bay of Bengal. What was supposed to be a 30-minute drive, but anytime Prashant tells you it's a 30-minute drive, what he means is it's an hour and 30 minutes. But we rode out to the Bay of Bengal, and on the way, of course, we encountered some more of the animal life, goats on the road, some Brahma cattle that you would have to navigate and dodge. And then on the left, you'll see some of the macaque monkeys. Now, the reason that's important is because they warn you not to put a phone anywhere that they can reach for them. Yet Melissa says, hey, put your phone out there and take a picture. No, in all seriousness, those are the monkeys, and they were very tame. They didn't seem bothered by us at all. We arrived at the Bay of Bengal, and there are just a few photos of the Indian Ocean, just as evidence that we are actually there. Then on our way back, on that 30-minute trip that took double or more long, there was a place that we were already scheduled to be called Govindapalli. The picture at the bottom right, the fellow at the far right, his name is Krishna. Krishna is a member at Coda, but he grew up in Govindapalli. And he had obeyed the gospel back in spring of 2025. And he arranged for us to have a street meeting there in Govindapalli on the evening of December 6th. And to the best of our knowledge, this was the first time that the gospel had been taught publicly by a member of the Lord's church in Govindapalli. And so that was sobering and encouraging all at the same time. You can see the attendance was solid, and yes, we were right there on one of their side streets. It's sort of a walking street, but not limited to that, because there were a couple of small automobiles that came past, and as is the custom in India, you honk to let folks know you're there, and so we just waved, let them pass, and go on about teaching. The people were extremely receptive, very kind, and I have not yet heard further progress about Govindapalli, but that being said, we go ahead and move forward. December 7th was Sunday. We had traveled back to Nellore, where our hotel was, and then drove another hour and a half that morning to Coda, where we worshiped with the brethren there. And after worship, we would, of course, have lunch, take care of a few details, and then we would go to a town that evening called Gatikadu. Gatikadu is an area where there is a Lutheran church. The preacher there is named Rothnaya. Rothnaya is no longer the preacher for the Lutheran church, because back on October 1st he was baptized into Christ, he and 6 other members of his family. Rothnaya still has influence with the members of the Lutheran church and arranged for us to be able to come and visit. He had a connection with Prashant. Prashant was actually the one who had baptized him. And so we were able to visit with the Lutheran church there in Gatikadu. And this is another occasion where the attendance was extremely encouraging. Now, they treated us so kindly that it made us uncomfortable. in terms of wanting to put us in chairs while they stood around and had photographs made. At the same time, the last thing we wanted to do was be discourteous. And so we uncomfortably, cringingly sat in the chairs, but we're very grateful for the kind reception that they offered. In this picture on the far left is Brother Rothniah. He is the one who obeyed the gospel back on October 1st and who arranged for us to be able to meet with the folks with this congregation. Happily, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get the picture into this presentation, Brother Prashanth was back in Gatikadu about 2 weeks ago, teaching again. And whereas we had started this our visit there teaching on fundamental basic principles, and it hit on baptism and the importance of immersion for the remission of sins, Brother Prashanth was able to go back and hone on that specific topic. After I had finished preaching and included the discussion of baptism, Rothniah stood in front of his former congregation and emphasized, and he preached about being immersed. And that is exactly what the Bible says. That's what I've done, and you all need to do that too. Those were his words as he stood before them. Now, he said them in Telugu, thank you. I almost said Telangana, but that's the region. He said them in Telugu. But those things being said, there were opportunities to plant seeds, and there are folks there that are willing to not only capitalize on guests, but also carry the weight for themselves. And so it was an extremely encouraging trip in both directions. December 8th and 9th, we would return to Hyderabad on a propeller plane because we had trouble with flights both going to and back from Tetrapati. Our original tickets were canceled when we had to adjust, and I had been on a propeller plane before, and so I was perfectly fine with it. However, there was a member of our party who had not been on a propeller plane before, and while I will not name names, she wasn't happy about it initially. That being said, afterward, she observed that must have been the smoothest flight that we had had. So we would return to Hyderabad. Melissa would teach a ladies' class later on that Sunday, and then we would return to Singapore. Now, with these things being conveyed, just here's the ladies' class that she taught, and again, there's more of her fan club, and Melissa teaching, and the one translating beside her is Angel Dasari. In Gatikadu, after we had spoken and visited with the church, they wanted us to go into their homes. And they had us come into homes where one family was grieving the passing of a young member of their family just a couple of months before. And they simply wanted prayers. This is the sister of the young man who had passed. And then this is the crowd that was greeting and just hoping to be able to extend a salutation. We joked when we returned home that, oh, hey, now we're not celebrities anymore. There were times in traveling through Hyderabad that folks would come up and of all sorts of different backgrounds. At one point, there were a group of Islamic ladies in their hijabs that came and asked if they could have their pictures taken with us. And there was no ill intent. They simply wanted their pictures taken because folks in Hyderabad don't often see Americans. That being said, just the showing of the face offers an opportunity to get people talking, asking questions, and a potential connection. And so it is a place where, no, you probably will not feel safe on the roads. In fact, if you do feel safe on the road, it's because you had Valium. But that being said, there may be things about that particular culture that would be harder for an American to get accustomed to seeing. But the opportunities are boundless. Being able to speak with a wayward congregation, in a community where there was no congregation of the Lord's church, and then visit with another congregation where they actually invited us into the Lutheran meeting house was extremely encouraging. Now, having said all of that, yes, we could look at other details regarding the trip, but as we left India, we traveled back through Singapore, visited with the brethren there for another couple of meetings, taught at Jurong again on Wednesday night, and then flew home on Friday. It was an opportunity to edify and be edified. It was an opportunity to educate and be educated. It was an opportunity to evangelize and be evangelized. Because too often we get accustomed to the idea that we've got the good news, but nobody wants it. Well, there's good news. There are people who want the good news. They're willing to listen. And yes, we were doing that work on the other side of the world. But we're talking about India, where the population is 1.4 billion. They've currently outpaced China, and there are people from India living throughout the world. And the people who are departing from there indeed are of the same culture, influenced by many of the same basics. And we would do well to keep our eyes open for opportunities, not only with those who may look like us, but with anyone with whom we can communicate or find the means to communicate. It is encouraging to see those who will do everything that they can to hear the gospel preached and to consider what they've been told and weigh it against what they previously heard. When I saw the picture of Prashant there back at Gatikadu, because I could recognize that pink wall in the background and that green windowsill. You don't see that everywhere. And seeing just that picture and knowing where he was, that means they'd invited him back. It means they wanted to hear more. That means the good news is being received. Now, from Melissa and myself, thank you. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to edify and be edified, to educate and be educated, to evangelize and to be evangelized. Thank you for allowing us the supplying so much of the help and aid that enabled us to be able to go. And we look forward to future opportunities to do the same. And yes, if you have any other questions about the area there, we'd be glad to give answers to those details. You might notice I'm not wearing my typical attire. This was the suit for which Prashant had me fitted. I'm glad I chose black, because being bald-headed, had I chosen gray, I would have looked like Blofeld from the old Bond movies. So black works better. In all seriousness, we have been blessed to spend time with brethren all around the world. And we literally went around the world on that trip, because we left here flying east and we came back from the other direction with our flights actually holding. And so we circumnavigated the globe, and we're able to come back all the better for it, because not only were we edified by what we saw where we were, as good as it was there, as encouraging, as uplifting, as enlightening, we couldn't wait to get back here. We're blessed. Brother John Brittingham mentioned how well received he was with the Anararity congregation at the start of this service, and of that I have no doubt. Please understand that when you're a part of the Lord's church, you're part of something special. And when you're a part of the Lord's church that meets here at Forest Hill, you're really a part of something special. I say that to say this: may we all commit ourselves to making sure that others feel like they too are part of something special every time they're with us. This afternoon, we engaged in that journey in order to take the gospel to souls thousands of miles away that may never have heard it or obeyed it. But there are still the souls right here in our very neighborhoods that have not obeyed the gospel and that need it. And it could be the case this evening that you're someone who has heard of the gospel of Christ. You've seen the Bible accounts, but you've never rendered obedience. Maybe you've been held back by your perceived culture or family influence, or maybe you've been held back by something in your life that you know shouldn't be there. It's not that you're being held back by whatever it is in life that shouldn't be there. It's that you would be holding yourself back by clinging to whatever it is that shouldn't be there. And so this afternoon, the encouragement is simply given in this regard. Would you be willing to let go of the pew? Would you be willing to let go of the problems? Would you be willing to let go of whatever it is that stands between you and the Lord in order to respond to His invitation and obey the gospel? Ultimately being baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins. This afternoon, maybe you are a child of God who needs repentance. Maybe you've lost sight of the kind of encouragement that can come from brethren who are indeed in all points having all things common. Acts chapter 2. Whatever the case may be, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, it's just as needed here as it is anywhere else on the globe. Why not take the opportunity while we stand and while we sing?